have some news from the other Robert in my life.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so just continuing with that theme of the censorship thing, this is another news bit that's very kind of continues along the lines of what Rowan Atkinson was talking about.
Why don't you lay it on us?
Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., of course, joined Elon Musk for a Twitter Spaces discussion yesterday about his campaign for president. The New York Times characterized the discussion as follows, quote, Robert Kennedy Jr. with Musk pushes right-wing ideas and misinformation.
And there it is. We need to censor misinformation, disinformation, and right-wing fascism. It's been demonized to the point where you can't have a conversation about anything that doesn't fit in neatly inside the narratives of power, because it's right-wing misinformation and you're a bad person for even talking about it. This is the result of the COVID hysteria.
Kennedy, a long-shot Democratic presidential candidate with surprisingly high polling numbers, said he wanted to close the Mexican border and attributed the rise of mass shootings to pharmaceutical drugs. The Times in particular took issue with Kennedy's
The mass shootings thing, I've said this multiple times, but to me, a lot of it is the lack of healthcare. Desperation, lack of healthcare.
Characterization of President Biden as a warmonger. Quote, Mr. Kennedy spent 9 uninterrupted minutes.
There it is. It's right wing to call Biden a warmonger because he's intentionally piping up wars with China and Russia right now.
Attacking Mr. Biden as a warmonger and claimed that their party was under the control of the pharmaceutical industry. I think the Democratic Party became the party of war, Mr. Kennedy said. I attribute that directly to President Biden. He added, he has always been in favor of a very bellicose, pugnacious, and aggressive foreign policy, and he believes that violence is a legitimate political tool for achieving America's objectives abroad.
So what I think is funny, too, is this rush to censor disinformation is because of that, because it's very well documented. Biden was in Congress for a long time. He voted for the Iraq war. He was one of the Democrats who cheerleaded it. Robert Kennedy is just telling the truth, and they're calling him a right-wing misinformation person.
I wonder which part of that was supposed to be misinformation. Journalist Glenn Greenwald weighed in on what he called a hit piece by the Times. Quote, the New York Times glossary, misinformation, words spoken by a critic of the Democratic Party establishment. Right wing, one who is a critic of the Democratic Party establishment. Of course, corporate outlets will attack all Biden opponents, but this New York Times hit piece on RFK Jr. is just dumb. He continued, how dare RFK Jr. characterize Joe Biden, someone who has vehemently supported every U.S. war for decades, was a key Senate advocate of the war in Iraq, and is flooding Ukraine with advanced weaponry, of being a warmonger. Why, this is misinformation. Censor it. I think Glenn is getting at something very real here, which is that, and we'll get into the full range of things that were discussed in this Twitter Spaces. There are many points of policy where I'm not a Democrat, where I disagree very much with where RFK Jr. is coming from, but I'm having a hard time agreeing with this framing by mainstream people, by the New York Times, that he is some uniquely duplicitous liar. The criticisms he's making of the Democratic Party with respect to how it has changed its views on free speech, the mainstream elites coming out against free speech, being the party, the consensus, the group that supports war, that supports neoconservatism, that's all true. That's all a trajectory change that has taken place over the last 15 years. It's true.
Of all the things to pick up and criticize out of that 2 hours Twitter Spaces, it's bizarre that they would hop on that particular bandwagon. I mean, not only did he say a lot of true things about the origin of the war in Ukraine, the provocations of Biden and Biden as VP under Barack Obama in the region, he talked about the way that the Democratic Party became aligned over time with the pharmaceutical industry. He talked about how Obama, to pass Obamacare, had to make this trade-off to get votes on board. And he basically threw the American people under the bus by saying we can't negotiate with the pharmaceutical industry. And at that point, the Democratic Party pivoted to be the party that took more money from the pharmaceutical industry as the Republicans. He showed a really interesting and comprehensive understanding of some of the reasons for bias in the media. He talked about how absurd it is to have a General Dynamic, military companies advertising during Morning Joe, and how that incentive there is not because, parents prepping their kids for school and watching the news are buying defense missiles, but because they want to be able to control the narrative, and the same thing happening in the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, there was so much truth in what he said. At the same time, I do think that the format again was awkward.
So I'm going to stop there because I don't care about the format. The reason I was showing that clip is because it's very clear what's going on here, and liberals support it. And again, it's like she was just talking about. One of the things that RFK said is, defense contractors are buying advertising time during Morning Joe, not because they're trying to sell weapons to parents getting their kids ready for school, but because they want to control the narrative. So they just get on there and go, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked. And then pretty soon the American populace is going, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion. Well, it's a very provoked invasion. We cooed their leader in 2014 and have been flooding the region with weapons since. So we're giving them the weapons to shoot into these territories at the border, or for these border territories to fight. And it's a threat to Russia. If Russia was arming extremists at the border of Texas in Mexico, of course we would do something about it. Of course we would invade and take them out. And I won't go into this whole thing, but I read a thing about how weapons that we are flooding Ukraine with are now starting to show up amongst cartels in Mexico, which maybe it's a CIA thing. Maybe it's just that the government there is so corrupt, they're selling the weapons that we're giving them to other countries to make some cash. That's probably the most likely story. But the thing that baffles me the most about America in general is, take the immigration issue, for example, right? The entire focus of that issue is on migrants, the people who are coming here. No one ever asks, why are they coming here? And if they're taking jobs, who's hiring them? The focus is always on the migrants, the people, the pawns, the people who are. So why are they coming here? Why are people coming from? Why are they coming to the United States from their countries? These countries, well, a lot of them live in countries that the United States is sanctioning. So there's no food. The economies are in shambles. And then we point at those countries and go, oh, socialism, see, it doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work because we don't allow it to work. The United States intentionally meddles. I mean, we have our hands in, so we have bases everywhere. We have our hands in everything. So, we need to have this come to Jesus moment as a country. And I'm a father, right? Like, I don't criticize my country because I'm a Russian. I criticize my country because I love it and I don't want to see it doing these things. I don't want to see it collapse on itself because of, idiotic bullshit that is unfounded, and this shit here, this streaming stuff is a good vent for me to just get this stuff out of my system, because it's just, it eats at me, it bothers me. Like, why are we doing this? We are not, the American people didn't vote for a war in Ukraine. The Ukrainian people didn't. Zelensky was elected on a peace platform. He was elected because he said he was going to make peace with Russia, but we're not allowing him to do that. So, I got way off track there, but the point was, censorship is bad.